When billionaire Elon Musk entered a quiet San Francisco cafe looking for a moment of calm after a busy tech conference, he never anticipated encountering his past. There, wiping down tables with gnarled hands, was 85-year-old Maribel Vega, the woman who had once bandaged his scraped knees, read him bedtime stories, and nurtured his earliest dreams of rockets and innovation. Shocked to discover his cherished childhood nanny still working two physically demanding jobs just to make ends meet, Elon faced a harsh reality. While he had risen to become one of the wealthiest individuals in the world, the woman who had helped shape his mind had been struggling in obscurity for years. What starts as a chance reunion quickly evolves into an extraordinary journey of redemption, revelation, and a bold plan that will transform both their lives forever. Because what Elon doesn't yet realize is that beneath this seemingly simple story of reconnection lies a long-buried family secret, one that will compel him to reevaluate everything he believed about his past and the very foundations of his success. Elon rubbed his tired eyes as he slipped out the back door of the San Francisco Convention Center. The tech conference had been a whirlwind of handshakes, cameras, and inquiries about Mars. Now all he craved was a moment of solitude before his driver arrived. "Just 15 minutes," he muttered to his security team. "I need coffee." His bodyguard nodded, scanning the street before pointing to a small cafe across the road. "That place looks quiet enough, sir." The cafe was indeed tranquil, just what Elon needed. The aroma of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air as he stepped inside. He ordered a black coffee and found a corner table away from the windows. From this vantage point, he could see the entire cafe. That's when he noticed her. An elderly woman in a blue and white uniform, slowly wiping down tables. Something about the deliberate way she moved caught his attention. Her silver hair was tied back in a neat bun, and despite her hunched shoulders, she worked with determination. Elon sipped his coffee, unable to look away. There was something familiar about her hands, the way her right wrist twisted slightly as she scrubbed a stubborn spot. "It couldn't be," he whispered to himself. The woman turned slightly, and Elon saw her profile. His coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Those same high cheekbones, the gentle curve of her nose. Memories rushed back like a flood. Bedtime stories in 2 languages, bandaged knees, and someone who truly listened when no one else would. Maribel. The name slipped from his lips before he could catch it. The old woman didn't hear him. She continued her work, moving slowly to the next table. Elon stood up, his heart racing. His security guard raised an eyebrow, but Elon waved him back. "Maribel Vega," he called louder this time. The woman turned, confusion crossing her weathered face. "Yes. Do I know you, sir?" Elon stepped closer. Up close, he could see the deep lines around her eyes and mouth. Her hands were spotted with age and rough from labor, but those eyes, those warm brown eyes, were exactly the same. "It's me," he said softly. Elon Musk, from Pretoria." Maribel's eyes widened. The cleaning rag dropped from her hand and fell to the floor. "Ellie," she whispered, using the nickname only she had ever called him. She reached out a trembling hand, stopping just short of touching his face. "My little Ellie? Is it really you?" Elon nodded, suddenly finding it hard to speak. This woman had wiped his tears, packed his lunch, and taught him that the stars weren't just lights in the sky, but worlds waiting to be explored. "You've grown so tall," she said, her accent still strong after all these years. "I see you on television sometimes. Space rockets and electric cars." She smiled proudly, just like you always said you would. "What are you doing here, Maribel?" Elon asked, glancing around the nearly empty cafe. "You must have turned 85 last month," she finished for him, bending slowly to pick up her rag. Elon bent down quickly to help her. "But why are you working at a cafe?" The question came out more bluntly than he intended. Maribel straightened her uniform, her pride evident in the way she lifted her chin. "Life happens, Nino. I work because I must. The bills don't pay themselves." A loud voice called from behind the counter. "Markel, tables 4 and 6 need clearing." "One moment, Mr. Davis," she called back, her voice suddenly sounding fatigued. "You should sit down," Elon said, noticing how she leaned slightly on the table for support. Maribel shook her head. "No time for sitting, Ellie. Besides, these old bones keep moving or they stop, Alto," she smiled. But Elon could see the weariness in her eyes. "Can we talk after your shift, maybe?" he asked. She checked the large clock on the wall. "I finish at 8. Then I catch the bus to my night job." "Night job?" Elon couldn't hide his shock. You work 2 jobs? Maribel nodded matter-of-factly. Night cleaning at the office buildings on Market Street. It pays better than daytime work. Elon ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process what he was hearing. The woman who had once bandaged his scrapes and stayed up with him during thunderstorms was spending her nights scrubbing office floors. Maribel, I want to... Maribel! Those tables... The manager's voice cut through their conversation again. I have to go, she said, giving Elon's arm a quick squeeze. You look good, Nino. Your mother would be proud. Before Elon could say anything else, she shuffled away, picking up dirty dishes as she went. He watched her work, noticing how she winced slightly when lifting a heavy tray. His security guard approached. Sir, your car is waiting. Elon nodded, unable to take his eyes off Maribel. She was already busy with another table, her back to him now. He pulled out his wallet and left a $100 bill under his coffee cup. It felt pathetically inadequate. Quiet. We need to change plans, he told his guard. I want to know everything about this cafe. Who owns it? Shift schedules, everything. And I need to know where she lives. The guard nodded, already making notes on his phone. Elon took one last look at Maribel, the woman who had once been the center of his childhood world, now invisible to everyone except his hands that cleaned their messes. As he walked out into the bustling San Francisco street, the contrast was dizzying. His car waited, sleek, expensive, comfortable. His phone buzzed with messages from people who wanted his time, his money, his ideas, and behind him was Maribel still working at 85, her hands red from hot water and chemicals. This isn't right, he whispered, sliding into the back seat of his car as his driver pulled away from the curb. Elon made a decision. The woman who had once cared for him would never have to clean another table or worry about bus schedules again. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he would ensure it. What he didn't realize was that helping Maribel would uncover a long-buried secret, one that would change everything he thought he knew about his past and force him to question the very foundation of his success. Back in his hotel suite, Elon paced the length of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights of San Francisco sparkled below, but he barely noticed them. His mind was in another place, another time. Maribel, he whispered the name, unlocking a flood of memories he hadn't visited in decades. He dropped onto the edge of the king-sized bed and closed his eyes. Suddenly he was 4 years old again, standing in the doorway of his childhood home in Pretoria, watching a younger Maribel arrive with a small suitcase and a warm smile. This is Miss Vega, his mother had said. She's going to help take care of you and your brother. Young Elon had studied her curiously. She wasn't like the other nannies. She didn't smell like perfume or talk to him like he was a baby. Instead, she knelt down to his level and asked, Do you like stories, Nino? When he nodded, she had smiled. Good. I know many stories, some in English, some in Spanish. Maybe we can learn together. Yes. Elon opened his eyes and reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts. He found the number for his private investigator. I need information on someone, he said when the man answered. Tonight, after the call, Elon walked to the minibar but didn't open it. Instead, he stood still, remembering the chaos of his parents' divorce. He'd been 8 when the fighting got bad, his father's voice always too loud, his mother's tears behind closed doors. Through it all, Maribel had been steady. When he hid in his room with his books and electronic projects, she brought him snacks without making him talk. When he couldn't sleep because of the shouting, she taught him to count the stars through his window. Find the Southern Cross, she would say, pointing to the night sky. When you feel lost, it will help you find your way. Elon walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. Looking at his reflection, he could almost see the skinny boy he'd been, the one who got bullied at school for being different, for thinking too much about the future instead of soccer and games. You have a special mind, Maribel had told him once, after he came home with a bloody nose. They hit you because they don't understand you. Someday they will wish they had been kinder. She had taught him more than his teachers ever did, not just reading and numbers, but how to think around problems. When his projects failed, she never said he was wrong. Instead, she asked, what can we learn from this mistake? Elon's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from his assistant. Found address for M. Vega. Also, Your meeting with investors moved to 10 a.m. tomorrow." He sent a quick thank you and went back to the window. Down below, the city was alive, with people heading home or out for the night. Was Maribel on a bus somewhere in that sea of lights, heading to scrub floors while everyone else slept? The memory that hit him next was painful. He'd been 10 years old, coming home from school excited to tell Maribel about winning the science fair. But when he burst through the front door, she wasn't there to greet him. "Where's Maribel?" he had asked his mother. "She had to leave, honey." His mother's voice had been strange, tight. "When is she coming back?" "She's not coming back." No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. For weeks he had waited by the window, sure she would return. His mother finally told him to stop. "It's adult business, Elon." Complicated adult business. He had never understood what that meant until his teen years. He'd sometimes imagine he saw her on the street or in a store, but eventually, like all childhood things, Maribel faded into the background of his memory until today. Elon's laptop chimed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Preliminary info on M. Vega." He clicked it open. There wasn't much yet, just basic details. Maribel Vega, age 85, immigrated to the United States 30 years ago. Current address: an apartment in a rundown part of Oakland. 2 jobs: cafe worker during the day, office cleaner at night. No criminal record. Small bank account, no retirement fund. "How is this possible?" Elon muttered. Another memory surfaced. Maribel teaching him to make paper airplanes. Not just simple ones, but complex designs that could fly across the entire garden. "Always think about the air, Nino," she had explained. "The air is invisible, but it's still real. The things we cannot see can be the most powerful." Later, when he built his first model rocket, she had helped him adjust the fins. "Balance," she had said. "Without balance, even the strongest rocket will fail." Elon realized with a start that he still used that exact phrase with his SpaceX engineers. His phone rang. It was his private investigator. "Mr. Musk, I found something interesting. M. Vega worked for several wealthy families over the years before coming to the U.S. She was employed by your family in South Africa from 1979 to 1985. "Yes, I know that part," Elon said impatiently. "What's unusual is how her employment ended. There's no record of her quitting or being formally terminated. She simply disappears from your family's records. Then, 3 weeks later, she appears at the U.S. Embassy applying for a visa. Emergency visa." Elon frowned. "What kind of emergency?" "That's what's strange. The paperwork just says family emergency, but I can find no record of any family crisis. Her sister was already living in California, healthy at the time, no deaths, no accidents. So she lied to get the visa?" Elon asked. "Confused?" "Us? Or someone helped her get it quickly and quietly," the investigator replied. "I'll keep digging." After hanging up, Elon lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Why would Maribel need an emergency visa? Why leave so suddenly without saying goodbye? His mother had never given him a straight answer about Maribel's departure. Now he wondered if there was more to the story than complicated adult business. He closed his eyes again, and this time he remembered something else. The last time he had seen Maribel, the night before she disappeared. He'd been in bed, almost asleep, when he heard raised voices from downstairs. His father angry as usual, but the other voice had been Maribel's. Not soft and gentle as it normally was, but fierce and protective. "You cannot speak to him that way," she had said. "He is just a boy." His father had replied something Elon couldn't make out, and then Maribel had said, "Then perhaps you should be the one to leave." The next morning she was gone. Elon sat up, the memory sharp and clear now. Had Maribel been fired for standing up to his father, for defending him? And if that was true, what else about his childhood had he misunderstood? He picked up his phone again, this time calling his mother in Canada. "Mom," he said when she answered, "I need to ask you about Maribel." The long silence that followed told him there was indeed a story here, one he was only beginning to uncover. "Mom?" Elon repeated into the phone. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," his mother finally answered, her voice unusually cautious. "Why are you asking about Maribel after all these years?" Because I just saw her today in San Francisco. A sharp intake of breath came through the phone. How is that possible? She's working at a cafe at 85 years old. She's cleaning tables and mopping floors. The silence returned, heavier this time. Mom, what happened back then? Why did she really leave? Elon, it's very late here. Can we talk about this another time? No, he said firmly. I need to know now. His mother sighed. Some things are better left in the past. Not this, Elon insisted. Not her. I'll call you tomorrow, his mother said. And the line went dead. Elon stared at his phone in frustration. Even after all these years, his mother was protecting secrets. But whose and why? Elon was building his first company in 1995. Maribel was working as a live-in caregiver for an elderly woman in Sacramento. Her days started at 5 a.m. and often didn't end until midnight. She slept on a fold-out couch in the living room and had Sundays off if the woman's daughter could come to visit. The year Elon sold PayPal and made his first millions, Maribel was learning that her sister Teresa had cancer. She moved to Oakland to care for her, working nights at a cleaning service so she could take Teresa to treatments during the day. When SpaceX was struggling to launch its first rocket successfully, Maribel was burying her sister and facing eviction from the small apartment they had shared. The rent had increased, and she couldn't afford it on her own. As Tesla's first Model S rolled off the production line, Maribel was standing in line at a free clinic, hoping the pain in her hands was just arthritis and not something worse. The doctor told her to find less physically demanding work. She smiled politely and went straight to her cleaning job. Two paths that had once crossed now ran parallel, never touching, separated by vast canyons of circumstance. The next morning, Elon canceled his investor meeting. But sir, these people flew in from Tokyo just to see you, his assistant protested. Reschedule. Tell them something came up, a family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. Maribel had been more family to him than many blood relatives. His driver took him to the address in Oakland his investigator had provided. The building was a squat gray apartment complex, with bars on the windows and peeling paint. A group of teenagers loitered near the entrance, eyeing his car suspiciously. Elon checked the time. 10:30 a.m. According to his investigator's report, Maribel should be at home between her night shift and afternoon cafe job. He pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. No answer. He tried again, longer this time. Finally, a crackly voice came through the speaker. Who is it? It's Elon Musk from yesterday. Another pause. Then the door buzzed open. The hallway smelled of old cooking and stronger things Elon didn't want to identify. Apartment 3B had 3 locks on the door. When it finally opened, Maribel stood there in a faded housecoat, her silver hair loosed around her shoulders. Ellie, what are you doing here? She looked nervously past him into the hallway. Is something wrong? May I come in? He asked. She hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. It's not much, she said apologetically. The apartment was tiny but spotlessly clean. A bed, a small table with 2 chairs, a kitchenette with a hot plate, and a television that might have been new when Reagan was president. Please sit, she said, gesturing to one of the chairs. I can make tea. Don't trouble yourself. She sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. How did you find me? That doesn't matter, Elon said gently. What matters is why you're here working 2 jobs at your age. Maribel straightened her shoulders. I take care of myself. I always have. But why did you leave South Africa so suddenly? Why didn't you say goodbye? Her eyes darkened. Some goodbyes are too hard to say, Nino. My mother won't tell me what happened. Then perhaps you should respect that. Maribel stood up slowly, wincing as she put weight on her left knee. Would you like that tea now? Elon realized he wouldn't get answers by pushing. He nodded. Tea would be nice. As Maribel filled a kettle, Elon noticed a small shelf near her bed. On it sat a few photographs and a stack of worn newspapers. He walked over casually. The photos showed a younger Maribel with another woman, her sister, he guessed, and a young girl who must be a niece or grandniece. But what caught his eye were the newspapers. They were clippings, yellowed with age, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. He picked one up. South African entrepreneur sells company for $165 million. His own face, much younger, stared back at him. Another. SpaceX successfully delivers cargo to International Space Station. And another. Tesla Motors aims to revolutionize auto industry. Maribel had been following his career all these years, saving every mention of his name she could find. "You kept track of me," he said softly. She set the teacups down with shaking hands. "I always knew you would do important things. Why didn't you ever contact me?" Maribel looked away. It was better this way. Better for who? He asked. Before she could answer, a coughing fit overtook her. It was deep and rattling, the kind that comes from years of hard work and poor health care. "Are you sick?" Elon asked, concerned. "Just old," she replied when she could speak again. "The doctors want me to take medicine for my lungs and my heart." But she shrugged. "But it's too expensive." He finished for her. She didn't deny it. Elon felt a surge of anger, not at Maribel, but at the cruel twists of fate that had led them here. While he'd been building rocket ships and electric cars, the woman who nurtured his young mind had been struggling just to survive. "I want to help you," he said firmly. Maribel shook her head. "I didn't keep those newspapers to ask for handouts, Ellie. I kept them because I was proud, still am. It's not a handout. It's what you deserve." She smiled sadly. "Life rarely gives us what we deserve, Nino. It gives us what we fight for." Elon knew then that this proud woman wouldn't accept his help easily, but as he sipped the tea she had made, plain black tea, no sugar because sugar was a luxury, he silently vowed to find a way. What he still didn't understand was why their paths had diverged so dramatically all those years ago, and why his mother was so reluctant to talk about it. The answer, he suspected, lay somewhere in that complicated adult business he'd been too young to understand. But he wasn't a child anymore, and he had resources now that even his father couldn't have imagined. Back in his hotel suite, Elon stared at his phone. His mother had finally texted. "Some things are best discussed in person. I'll fly out tomorrow." Too long. He needed answers now. His private investigator had sent a more detailed report. Elon opened the file on his laptop and began to read. Most of it was information he already knew. Maribel's immigration records, work history, current situation. But halfway through, something caught his eye. Financial records show regular payments from a South African bank account to Ms. Vega between 1985 and 1995. Account holder, May Musk. His mother had been sending Maribel money for 10 years after she left. Why? Elon scrolled further. The payments had stopped in 1995, right around the time he'd started his first company with his brother and made his first significant money. Had Mom run out of funds to help her? He wondered aloud. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a folder. "Sir, I have the information you requested about Maribel Vega's employment history." Elon took the folder eagerly. "What did you find?" "She worked for 3 families after arriving in the U.S., all wealthy, all with young children." His assistant hesitated. "And all 3 families terminated her employment within 2 years, no official reason given." "That's unusual for someone who worked for my family for 6 years, Elon said, frowning. "There's more. After the 3rd family, she switched to elder care and cleaning jobs, lower paying, but she stayed in those positions much longer." Elon flipped through the documents, trying to understand the pattern. Why would an experienced, dedicated nanny suddenly start getting fired, and why switch to less desirable jobs afterward? His phone rang. The caller ID showed his investigator's number. "Mr. Musk, I found something you need to see immediately. I'm sending it now." Seconds later, Elon's email pinged with a new message. He opened the attachment, a scanned document from 1985. It was a letter on his father's business letterhead. As he read, his hands began to shake. The letter was addressed to the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, supporting Maribel's emergency visa application. It stated that her services were no longer required by the Musk family, and that there would be negative consequences if she remained in South Africa. It was essentially a threat wrapped in professional language. "What the hell?" Elon whispered. The investigator's voice came through the phone. "There's more. I tracked down the daughter of the family Maribel worked for in Sacramento. She remembers Maribel well, and says her mother specifically hired her because she came highly recommended by your mother." "My mother?" Yes. Apparently your mother helped several families hire Maribel over the years, always with the same warning that Maribel might need to leave suddenly if your father ever discovered where she was working. Elon felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. None of this made sense. Keep digging, he told the investigator. I need to know everything. After hanging up, Elon paced the room, trying to piece together this puzzle. His father had forced Maribel out of South Africa. His mother had secretly helped her for years afterward, and everyone had hidden this from him. But why? An hour later, his phone rang again. This time, it was a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Musk, this is Gerald Winters. I was your father's attorney in Pretoria from 1980 to 1989. Elon sat down slowly. How did you get this number? Your investigator contacted me. He said you were looking into Maribel Vega's departure. I've been retired for years, but I thought I should speak with you directly. I'm listening, Elon said, his voice tight. You need to understand the context, Winters began. Your father was an important man in Pretoria. He had a reputation to protect and connections to maintain. Get to the point, the attorney said. Your nanny, Miss Vega, became problematic. She interfered in how your father wanted to raise you. She encouraged interests he didn't approve of. She contradicted his instructions. She cared about me. Elon said flatly, perhaps. But the final straw came when she witnessed an incident between you and your father. A disciplinary matter, I believe. Elon's mind flashed back. His father's angry voice, a sharp pain hiding in his room. She threatened to report him for child abuse, Winters continued. Back then, with your father's connections, such a report would likely have gone nowhere. But she was making a scene, refusing to back down. Elon closed his eyes, the pieces finally clicking into place. So he had her deported? Not exactly. The agreement was that she would leave the country voluntarily with a letter of recommendation for future employment, and your father would not pursue charges against her for alleged theft. Theft? Elon's eyes snapped open. That's ridiculous. Maribel never stole anything. Of course she didn't, Winters agreed. But it was a convenient accusation that would have made it impossible for her to find work in South Africa again. Your father could be persuasive when crossed. And my mother? Where was she in all this? There was a pause on the line. Your mother negotiated the agreement that allowed Miss Vega to leave safely. She insisted on being the one to handle the recommendation letters and helped her secure the visa. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? You were a child, Mr. Musk, and later, well, some secrets take on a life of their own. The longer they're kept, the harder they are to reveal. After ending the call, Elon sat in stunned silence. All these years he'd thought Maribel had simply left. In reality, she had been forced out for trying to protect him. His assistant knocked and entered with another folder. Sir, I have M. Vega's current medical records. Elon took the folder numbly. How did you get these? You don't want to know, sir. Elon opened the folder and began to read. What he saw made his stomach turn. Untreated hypertension. Early-stage COPD from years of working with cleaning chemicals. Severe arthritis in both hands and knees. Cataracts forming in her right eye. All treatable conditions if she could afford treatment. He closed the folder. Book me on the next flight to New York and get my mother a hotel room when she arrives tomorrow. Not here. Somewhere else. Yes, sir. May I ask why New York? I need to speak with my brother in person. While his assistant made the arrangements, Elon stared out the window at the San Francisco skyline. The pieces were falling into place. But the picture they formed was ugly. His father had driven away the one person who had truly protected him as a child. His mother had helped Maribel escape, but kept the truth hidden. And Maribel herself had suffered in silence for decades, too proud to reach out, perhaps too afraid of stirring up the past, all while he had become one of the richest men in the world. The irony was bitter. Some of his most fundamental principles, his drive to solve problems, his determination to stand up against conventional thinking, had been nurtured by Maribel. Her influence had helped shape him into the innovator he became. And all this time, she had been struggling to survive, watching his success from afar. His phone buzzed with a text from his investigator. Found something else. Maribel has a grandniece named Lua, college age, apparently brilliant, accepted to MIT engineering program but couldn't afford to attend. Elon felt a surge of determination. He couldn't change the past, but he could certainly change the future for Maribel and her family. But first, He needed the whole truth, and for that, he needed to confront his mother. As his assistant returned to confirm his travel arrangements, Elon made another decision. I want to buy that cafe where Maribel works, and the cleaning company too. His assistant blinked in surprise but quickly recovered. Right away, sir. Any particular reason? Elon's expression hardened. Because no one should work until they're 85 out of necessity, especially not someone who helped make me who I am. What Elon didn't yet realize was that the truth about Maribel's influence on his life went even deeper than he imagined, and that the real story was only beginning to unfold. The next morning, Elon woke to a string of messages from his legal team. Both acquisitions in progress. Cafe owner eager to sell, cleaning company more resistant. He smiled grimly. Resistance was expected, but everyone had a price. By the end of the day, he would own both companies that employed Maribel, but buying her workplaces was just the first step. The real challenge would be helping her in a way she would accept. Elon had spent enough time with Maribel to know that direct charity would offend her pride. This woman had worked her entire life supporting herself and others through sheer determination. A handout, no matter how well-intentioned, would feel like pity to her. No, he needed a more thoughtful approach. His mother's flight would land in 3 hours. Before confronting her, he wanted to see Maribel again, this time with a clearer understanding of their shared past. He ordered his driver to take him to the cafe. It was mid-morning, and the place was busy with customers typing on laptops and holding business meetings. Elon spotted Maribel immediately. She was wiping down a table near the window, her movements careful but efficient. He watched her for a moment. Despite her age and obvious pain, she worked with quiet dignity. When a customer accidentally knocked over a coffee cup, she was there instantly with a cloth and a kind word that made the embarrassed young man smile with relief. Small kindnesses. That was Maribel's way then and now. When she turned and saw Elon, her eyes widened in surprise. He gestured toward an empty table in the corner, and she nodded, finishing her task before making her way over. 2 days in a row, she said, a hint of worry in her voice. Is something wrong, Ellie? I'd like to buy you lunch, Elon said. Is your break? Maribel glanced at the clock. I have 30 minutes at noon. I'll come back then, he promised. Instead of returning to his hotel, Elon had his driver take him to a small diner a few blocks away. Not too fancy, not too cheap, a place where Maribel might feel comfortable. At precisely noon, he was waiting outside the cafe. Maribel emerged, looking tired but composed in a faded blue sweater that had replaced her work uniform. You didn't have to do this, she said as they walked to the diner. I wanted to, Elon replied simply. Inside, they settled into a booth. Maribel studied the menu with careful attention to the prices, finally selecting a bowl of soup. Is that all you want? Elon asked. It's enough, she said firmly. Elon ordered soup for himself as well, though he wasn't particularly hungry. Tell me about your life, he said once the waitress had gone. After you left South Africa, Maribel seemed hesitant, then slowly began to speak. She told him about coming to America to care for her sister Teresa, who had multiple sclerosis, about the family she worked for in those early years, how each job had ended abruptly, though she didn't explain why. And then you switched to elder care, Elon prompted. Yes, it was simpler. Her eyes met his briefly, then looked away. No children involved. Elon understood the unspoken message. No children meant no painful reminders of him, no attachments that might be suddenly severed. Teresa died 12 years ago, Maribel continued, cancer. After that, it was just me. No family of your own? A shadow crossed her face. I never married. My work was my life. The soup arrived, steaming hot. Maribel bowed her head briefly, a silent grace, before taking a careful spoonful. You mentioned a night job, Elon said. Office cleaning? She nodded. 5 buildings on Market Street. The pay is better at night. That sounds exhausting. Work is work, she shrugged. I'm lucky to have it at my age. Elon wanted to argue that point, but held back. Instead, he asked, Do you have any family now? For the first time, Maribel's expression brightened. My grandniece, Lucia, Teresa's granddaughter. She's so smart, Ellie, like you were. Tell me about her. Maribel's pride was evident as she described Lucia, 19 years old, brilliant with computers and mathematics, the first in their family to finish high school. She got accepted to a big university for engineering, Maribel said, her voice dropping. But we couldn't afford it. Even with loans, she's at community college now. MIT, Elon said quietly. Maribel looked up, startled. How did you know? Just a guess. He lied smoothly. You said she's good at math. As Maribel continued talking about Lucia, Elon's mind was racing, pieces of a plan falling into place. The girl's situation was the perfect opening, a way to help that might bypass Maribel's pride. I've been thinking, he said when Maribel paused for breath. I'm working on a new project. Something important. Another rocket? She asked with genuine interest. No, something different. An educational initiative. This wasn't entirely a lie. Education had always been an interest of his, though the specific project he was about to describe didn't yet exist. At least not until he made a few calls. After lunch, I'm creating a program for children of my employees, he continued. Quality childcare with real educational value, not just babysitting. Maribel nodded approvingly. The thing is, Elon said, watching her closely, I need someone with experience to help develop the curriculum. Someone who understands how to nurture young minds. That sounds wonderful, Maribel said, not yet catching his meaning. I'd like your help, Maribel, as a consultant. She froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Me? But I'm not a teacher. I don't have degrees. You have something more valuable. Experience. Real-world wisdom about how children think and learn. He leaned forward. You helped shape my mind when I was young. I'd like others to benefit from that same wisdom. Maribel sat down her spoon, her expression a mix of surprise and suspicion. What exactly would this job involve? Advising our educational team? Sharing your insights? Helping design activities that encourage creativity and problem-solving. Elon was improvising, but with each word, the idea made more sense. It would be part-time, well-paid, and much less physically demanding than what you're doing now. The suspicion in her eyes deepened. Why me, after all these years? Because I never forgot what you taught me, Elon said truthfully, about looking at problems differently, about persistence. Those lessons helped make me successful. For a long moment, Maribel said nothing, then very quietly. This feels like charity, Ellie. It's not, he insisted. It's business. I need someone with your skills. At my age? Age brings wisdom. That's what we need. Maribel shook her head. No time for sitting. I can eat partly more adjusted every day. But please, I don't want to hurt my kids. I have a new friend, Will. Once you see me get better, I can help with all of your children who deserve it. I will call you tomorrow. Please, help all of us. They switched on the translator, but it was slow as it spent more time scanning the database than synthesizing questions to speak. She closed her eyes and nodded. Let's see more about how you can enhance your understanding, and therefore how to create more engagement. More engagement! More engagement! Please talk to me at least 3 times before you make upfront calls. Please! Talk to me about everything we've shared while building things we care about. The answer, with some variations to her experiences thus far, matched quite closely with all Elon could find. And as he became more familiar with her understanding of life, he realized how important it was for her to be appreciated. The next day, Luca visited and supported her, and together they processed portions from a wider engagement that reflected a structure for a relevant baseline that he could use to yield results both in terms of delivering those big dreams and upholding standards of continuity on behalf of peer-to-peer learning. The sad but meticulous way he engaged everyone reflected more than just securing his knowledge. He turned to Luca later with pride as they watched the light shine through new learning aspects. Wow! Within a few hours, your mother already immersed so much detail. That's what it means to learn through interaction. Luca beamed. You're set now to compound some knowledge and forward all this, right? Elon smiled slowly and walked away into a much starker channel of thought. If you need help understanding all the logistics affecting each outcome, please let me know if there are high expectations in a manner consistent with the law related to Financial Operating Committee protocol. While it all felt safe and sound, The nuances held great heft akin to going into a personal voyage of discovery. He got back in touch to ensure productive lines of engagement intersected for greater growth potentials for every shared insight discovered along the way. Ensuring the integrity of their personal lines could set a new precedent for values he eyed on his quest. Standing firm on the cul-de-sac ahead, they all felt alive in the sparkle of possibilities before them as kids buzzed with excitement, bouncing easily from step to step across a bridge and swaying amongst open, approachable hearts. And then, as it transformed and even lifted those who were on it, the unfoldings of family in motion as they traveled to consider everything that came from support. Creative intensity made its way to a higher blend of each of their experiences from that point onward. The wild yet deep exchange overall soared freely yet guided insight standing tall through its thorough ambiance. Coda. And so, as destiny loomed ahead, like shining starlight unseen from another galaxy, together, they launched. So let me know where you are listening from. Where does your heart align to listen across all? If you like this video, leave a like, subscribe, and help us bring you more exciting stories involving celebrities. Here you will be updated every day on the world of celebrities. See you soon.